when someone joins a news channel for the first time, they would ideally have to choose or will be assigned a certain department to work in. They would have to make their mind as to whether they want to be a reporter on the field, whether they're looking to be more an anchor reporter, or they want to work on the desk, which is the input-output team, to sift through the news and package and produce the news. So depending on which field you choose, of course you will start as a trainee sometimes, then as a junior reporter, a junior producer, for example, if you're working in the office. You can then graduate to being a senior reporter, a principal correspondent, or a senior anchor, or a senior producer on the desk. And therefore there are different hierarchies that exist in different news channels, which are called different, but virtually it's the same work. And eventually, after many years of service, you can either become a shift in charge if you are on the rundown side, an output editor or an input editor if you have great knack of sourcing information, of sifting through what is available and then focusing on what is the most important news, what is different that the viewers must get to know. Or if you are more equipped with telling the story, then of course you can graduate to becoming a senior reporter, a senior anchor. As I mentioned, roles in television news are very fluid today. It's not like an anchor only anchors or a reporter only reports. We do everything. Everyone does everything because a great amount of synergy is required for television news to be produced. So it no longer works in silos. So oftentimes the editor on output, for example, who has 10, 15, 20 years of experience will come in to give a live because they have in-depth knowledge about the current story that is going on air, and therefore they can bring that perspective. So it doesn't necessarily only have to be a reporter on the field. Similarly, an anchor oftentimes goes out according to their interests, or if they follow any beat in particular, they go out and report as well. Beat refers to a particular assignment or a particular area of stories that is assigned to any reporter. For example, you could be a parliament reporter, or you could be a finance ministry reporter, or you could be a sports reporter or an entertainment reporter. Similarly, you will track the news that is coming in from that field, from that genre as well. Today you would see, of course, there are separate shows that are also there. There would be a sports show, there would be an entertainment show, there would even be a business show sometimes on a news channel. And of course, there are business channels that work separately, that only focus on the business world. So there are these specializations that are available. So it would be good for anyone who is starting in a news channel to first decide whether they want to be on camera or off camera. Do they like producing a story more, or do they like telling the story more on camera? And therefore, depending on your work, on your talent, you can grow by leaps and bounds in any news channel, because your talent is something that shows through the stories that you tell, whether you're packaging a story or you're reporting live. And it's a very fair system because whatever works. If you are telling a good story, if you're making a good package, if you're researching well for your story, it shows in your story, and therefore it is appreciated, and of course there is more demand for that kind of work. At the top of the hierarchy in a news channel is usually a managing editor or an editor-in-chief. The designations may change according to different channels, and some may even have both. The larger role of the managing editor or the editor-in-chief is to manage the overall functioning of the news channel. The day-to-day running is handled more by, let's say, shift producers or senior editors. But the managing editor or the editor-in-chief lays down the vision for the channel. They would give larger direction onto what are the stories that we should really be focusing on and how to treat those stories. There is also a dedicated guest team that is there in all news channels. Now this is the team that is in charge of bringing in voices on the channel. For example, if you're doing a story from Rajasthan and we want a Rajasthan political leader to come and join us on the show, that's what the guest team does. So their job is also very demanding. They need to be in touch with a lot of the politicians and also leaders from across the political spectrum, but also other areas of interest as well. For example, if there is a Chandrayaan 2 launch, Ideally, a news channel would have a lot of space scientists or former ISRO chiefs on the channel, and it is usually the job of the guest team to get in those voices on the channel that people would want to listen to. All of this is done in conjunction, of course, with the larger team. Usually there's an edit meeting that is held somewhere in the first half of the day around 10-11, and one later in the evening to do forward planning for the next day. In the morning meeting, they would decide what are the big events that are happening, what are the news that is coming in, what are the special stories that the reporters are focusing on, if there is any investigative story that is being worked on by the channel, and they therefore decide their day's flow, in which the managing editor, the senior editors, and also of course the input-output heads will give in their inputs on how we should present the news or what are the big stories to focus on. The guest team will then work accordingly, the production team will then work accordingly and produce graphics on the same. The research team will also do and send across research on the same, and then that's how the bulletins are done. One major phenomenon these days in news channels is of course the prime time news debates. Now those debates of course can have anywhere from 4 to 8 to 10 to 12 guests, and it is usually the job of the editorial team and also the guest team to line up all of those guests for the show. There are cameramen who go sometimes to the guests or guests come to the studio. So it's really a very cohesive unit that can be successful in producing television news. It is not as simple as what happens in print, for example, because you have to work with a lot of people to get your story on air.